Thank you so much to everybody who has decided to join us today to talk about the topic around leading remote teams. Just a few housekeeping rules. We will probably do some questions at the end, but if there is a relevant question, we'll interject. And you don't need to take notes because we're going to be sending you an awesome PDF with all of our tips. So I am going to hand over to two amazing HR gurus. We have Dora Kordakis, who's a performance specialist for HR gurus, and then we've got managing partner Jessy, and they have been on the ground helping support lots of businesses around how to lead remote teams in this new environment, and we're going to be sharing some of our insights today. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Jessy, and she's going to kick things off.
Good morning, everyone. So, in the coronavirus pandemic, we have definitely seen some new trends, and we've redefined what is normal in the workplace. And we've got a few facts here, which is quite interesting. So over 80% of workers have been affected in some way by this pandemic. One in four employees have had their hours reduced, and 7% have taken a pay cut. And over a third of Australian workers are now working remotely. And if we look at office workers, that figure jumps to 61%, which is over half of office workers in Australia, which is massive. So we could definitely, safely say that this is the new normal. So the world of work has not seen a shift like this since the introduction of the internet and email. So what now? What are we going to take from this? How do we manage this effectively? And are we going to go back to the way things were, or is some of this remote working here to stay?
Absolutely, Jessy. It's really about, you're absolutely right, it's about the new normal. And we can see that the new normal happens in so many different ways. So the first thing that we've been really focused on is making sure that everybody that is working remotely is safe and healthy during these times. And for a lot of leaders, the first step to smashing out people's day was making sure that people were set up. And that looked like setting up workspaces at home, finding a space within your own home environment that you could set up that looked like an office and had all of the correct occupational health and safety regimes. We're all now experts on Zoom calls and online conferencing. And by now, we would probably safely say that most of us have established some level of a routine that looks like that juggle, whether it's, helping our children do homeschooling while we're actually engaged in different parts of our work and attending Zoom calls and meetings. One of the things that's really important, though, is also ensuring that people are psychologically safe in their workspace, and that we're also tapping into ensuring that legally we've got these reforms set up. Jessy, have you got something that you want to share around that legal safety?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just because employees are working from home, they're still working, and so you still have an obligation as their employer to ensure their health and safety. So, a lot of that you mentioned, Dora, in having an ergonomical workstation and making sure that they're safe in that regard. But I think that something that's a little bit unseen is, in self-isolation, people start to feel isolated, and, the risk of a psychological injury whilst working from home is very real, and it's a WHS risk and a massive risk for employers as well, is managing that, there's no psychological injuries when people are at home and self-isolating.
Yeah. So I'm actually really excited about focusing on that part of what it means to look to actually lead people remotely. And we have created 5 success factors that are going to support leaders to be able to lead remotely and think about people's psychological safety. These are not random success factors. These are things that we've really brainstormed together, and our clients have actually also been able to give us a lot of food for thought around these things. So we really want to share these, and we're really excited about sharing them with you today. So we are going to have a little bit of a deep dive into these 5 key success factors. The first one being, of course, communication. And this is an element where if you've actually been engaged in soft skills training throughout your leadership journey, you will find that you'll be high-fiving yourself. We're also going to be looking at what empathy looks like, what setting goals looks like remotely, focusing on wellbeing, and of course having some fun as well while we're all in isolation. So you asked me a really interesting question yesterday, Jessy.
I do you think when people are working remotely that it's possible to over communicate?
This is a really interesting point, and I'm really excited about this one because I think that there is a difference between how we communicate and what we communicate. So at the moment, people can have a bit of fatigue around Zoom calling, and I think there's a catchphrase for it that you know quite well, Jessy. What did you call it?
Yeah, I've heard people talk about Zoom anxiety, like anxiety but for Zoom. And some executives I've spoken to, they are on video calls so often and so many times a week that they're getting a bit over always being seen.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the disparity, isn't it? The difference between how often we communicate with one another, but what the actual content is. So my rule of thumb would be ensuring that, yes, we're open and transparent in our communications and we are meeting regularly so that we're engaging with people. But I think that the undercurrent around that is really about making sure that you know why you are actually touching base with somebody and reaching out to them. So our messages need to be really succinct and specific.
So like we do in our normal day-to-day pre-pandemic, we don't want to be having meetings about the meeting, right?
Yeah, no way. People need to also have time to do their work. So if they're on Zoom calls one after the other, as well as juggling some of the other priorities that are taking them away from their office space, which might be things like, you know, helping their children during homeschooling and having to think about having a break and you know, doing a domestic task. We want to make sure that when we are communicating with people, there is a reason. Our weekly check-ins can be quite well structured in order to make sure that we're getting information from people and giving people information. We do something at HR Gurus, which we did face-to-face, and we've actually been able to continue to do it online, which is when we do have our weekly check-ins, we look at 3 particular elements. And the first one is, what are our priorities for the week, so that our leader can actually really have an understanding of what we are working on. What our wins have been. So what are our critical success factors and what are we really proud of? And what challenges are we facing? So what might be the clues for you as leaders where you can then tap into your individual discussions with your team members around what they might be struggling with? The beautiful thing about Zoom, if that's the platform that you're using, is that it gives you a time factor if you're flowing through on a free Zoom call, which is 40 minutes, which basically means that you can make sure that you target the critical things that you need to talk about within a time frame, which is great. It's really important also when we are communicating that we don't just think about, okay, we've done a team meeting, tick that box, but are you actually touching base with individuals as well as the teams? And making sure that we're following up around what people have done and where we think that they might need some support. Jessy, what do you think about people that have been stood down? How do we communicate with them? Or should we be communicating with them?
That's a really good question, and I think it depends on what your plans for the future are. We're in a bit of an unprecedented time, so it's if they've been stood down because of the pandemic, it would be great to stay in contact with them, because when business does come back to usual, you want to have that connection with those people to be able to bring them back in and let them know that those are your intentions.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So our next hot tip number 2 is leading with empathy. So empathy doesn't really come naturally for everyone, does it, Jessy?
No, I think it's something that some people need to work on. And interestingly, during this time, it's sometimes hard to have empathy through a video call, right?
Yeah.
And I've heard that a good trick for people who it doesn't come naturally to is listen to understand rather than to respond.
I love
So that's
that.
a really good tip. But also, yeah, it's more challenging when you're not when you've got a computer screen in between you to really feel how the other person's feeling and pick up on the cues that you might usually pick up on.
So how do you feel about really important messages being communicated to teams? Is that an empathetic approach?
It depends on what the message is, really. I mean, if it's an important announcement, I mean, it's always important to lead with empathy and also understand that, these times are challenging for everybody. So if somebody's not meeting their objectives or delivering, rather than coming down really harshly, actually getting an understanding of why they are where they're at and offering them support is going to get you a lot further than being really harsh at this point in time. So
what I'm hearing you say there is that people might be feeling a little bit psychologically unsafe to negotiate or to speak up on some platforms. So as a leader, our radar around that needs to be really, really heightened, doesn't it, Jessy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, giving people that certainty as well, as much as possible. I mean, you don't know if your organisation is going to survive this, but letting them know that what the plans are and that you intend for their roles to be safe, or, that if you've qualified for JobKeeper, that at least they're going to have the JobKeeper allowance until the end of September. That would give them some certainty as well. So I think that helps with the psychological safety, but also just, put yourself in their shoes. This is a tough time. So making sure that you have that empathy, because at the end of this, if you don't lead with empathy, people are going to leave. They're going to think, I don't really want to work for those people. They're assholes.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as a leader, our primary focus is our people. And part of our leadership journey when we're leading people with empathy remotely is about making sure that we have an understanding of what their anxieties and needs are. So by asking open-ended questions on your one-on-ones, you might be able to uncover what those anxieties look like. Your coaching skills are going to come in front of mind at the moment, because part of our coaching skills allows us to support people to set goals and manage expectations, but to really listen and understand with empathy about what their priorities are, what they might be juggling, and what kind of things might be standing in their way to get things done. We know that we've still got outputs that we need to actually make sure that we hit targets. So asking questions around how people are setting their day is another really important part of setting people up for success. Goal setting has always been a part of our working day, and as leaders, one of the things that we do is we set expectations and we create structure. And that's not going to change while people are working remotely, because that might become part of their normal now. Yeah, people might not be returning back into the office the way that we were pre-COVID-19. So there's some really great opportunities to ensure that as coaches and as leaders, we understand what people are doing and what is important to them, and give them some autonomy around how and when they will actually structure their day, or how they'll structure their day to achieve their goals, and when they'll be able to do the tasks that are expected of them to be able to then hand work in. Brene Brown talks about, what does done look like? And I think that that's a really fantastic question when we're setting goals and managing expectations, because it gives us all a really clear understanding of when someone has actually completed a task or has actually achieved their goal, and if it actually resonates with what the organisation needs and what the team needs. So it's really important at this point in time, as a leader, to ask your employees remotely, what is their plan of action? How are they going to structure their day? What does done look like, and what are the time frames that they're actually going to be working towards?
And I think as well, what's come out of this remote working is that, the 9 to 5 isn't necessarily practical. So if you've got children at home, you might need to be homeschooling, so your productive time might be at 7 a.m. in the morning, or you might work late at night when they go to sleep. It's a juggle for a lot of people. So setting the goals, but also having realistic timeframes and keeping that open communication with your employees about what is a realistic timeframe, so that you're able to set them up for success. Really important.
And Jessy, in regards to this, I think this is a really great space to also talk about the fact that there are some employees that leaders will have that are really on top of this and are really excited about keeping that momentum of their workplace alive while they're working remotely. But there are other people that will use this time to fly under the radar. So how can we support people to set goals and achieve expectations when they're kind of feeling a little bit like, oh yeah, I can slack off a little bit here?
I think that is, again, it goes back to communication and holding people accountable, being able to have those check-ins, those daily check-ins or the team check-ins as well, and making sure that everyone's up to date with where they need to be. There's been a lot of great technology that is getting used in this time frame, like the project management tools like Trello really help to keep people accountable and have that transparency across the team on who's working on what. So there's been a lot of great tools which existed before COVID-19, but I think that now people are utilising it a lot more.
Yeah. I think that's a really great point as well, because I know for myself, for years I've been thinking about doing webinars, and I've always not approached it as an opportunity. I love the face-to-face. I love being a facilitator that stands in front of a group and grabs energy from a live audience. And you're absolutely right. This particular time in our history and in our life and in our working spaces is really showing us that we need to be really agile and flexible to be able to do things differently. So it's likely that even the way that we work and the way that we set goals and expectations and tasks and follow up is going to look different in a few months' time, isn't it?
Definitely. And I think, like, anecdotally, from a lot of people I've been speaking to, the productivity and efficiency has actually improved a lot. A lot of companies' sales are actually going up in this time. So it doesn't mean that just because people are working remotely that they are slacking off. It's about, if you can manage your team well and you've got that trust and empathy and clear communication, your teams could still be humming, really.
Absolutely. And of course, what that means as well is that we have to think about how people are feeling.
Yeah,
The good old
and
soft
it's
skill stuff.
definitely it's back to, well, it's the physical safety that's important, but as we spoke about before, that psychological safety. So, you know, our whole philosophy in HR is getting people, you know, enabling people to be their best every single day, and they're not going to be able to do that if they are, you know, suffering from anxiety or depression from being self-isolated, or they haven't had any gone outside, or, you know, like me, they're eating this very indulgent ISO diet, you know, and losing track of their well-being and health goals as well. So, you know, if you want to get the best out of your team every day to really support their physical and emotional well-being is so important.
Yeah. So part of well-being, I'm hearing, is that, you know, the most important thing at the moment is really getting past the obvious. And, you know, as a leader, part of our responsibility in our leadership platform is making sure that if people are hiding, I suppose, behind the screen of face-to-face, we need to really be able to probe appropriately, and with compassion and with empathy, to ask really open-ended questions that engage people to make sure that they're feeling okay. So what kind of questions should we as leaders be asking people?
That's a good question. So I think it's about knowing your team, you know, but it's also about, you know, a simple question like, how's everyone feeling today? What support do you need? You know, how are you going with your goals? This is not about, it's not about a harsh check-in. It's about making sure that everyone's okay and on track and who needs what. I mean, we've seen some great initiatives, you know, through our client network where they go for virtual walks. You know, they instead of having their meetings via Zoom, they'll have a walking meeting where they talk and walk, which is really healthy. People exchanging healthy recipes. You know, having a bit of fun with the well-being, but, you know, just asking how are you? How's everything going? Is there anything that I can support you with? Is a great question.
And that's something that we really advocate even in our own team, isn't it, Jessy? We, you know, sometimes we will connect in our morning meeting via our phones, put our headphones on and all go for a virtual walk together and talk about, you know, where we are and what we're seeing and, you know, things that aren't necessarily work-based, but we also can check in and say to each other, we are actually going for a walk together, rather than asking the pivotal, are you looking after yourself? And that just becomes another thing that I need to put on my checklist.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if you pick up as a leader that a team member is not coping, you know, even just suggesting some things that you've done can really help. So, for example, just saying, yeah, I'm feeling much the same, and it's a beautiful day outside, so I'm going to go and sun myself for 15 minutes or something, just to give them that permission to be able to do that for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose another part of wellbeing is really about asking people, how can I assist you on this project or in this task? Or is there somebody that you would like me to connect you with in order to make sure that you're still collaborating and you're not sitting in an isolated environment thinking, how am I going to do this? I don't even know how to start. Because in a workplace or in an office environment, you may have just gotten up off your desk and walked around the corner and asked somebody just to have a look at your work or asked a question.
Yeah, definitely. The point I'm taking from that is it's really important to stay connected, you know, for your team to feel that they're connected and not just working on their own out in Mars.
Which then takes us really into having some fun, guys. It's really important to have a laugh. And we've seen globally how people are really sharing ways that they are having some fun during this isolated time, whether it's changing lyrics to a song, or doing a dance off, or being able to play some, online bingo, whatever it might be that your team feels is relevant, and also some fun. And on our PDF, if you're creatively blocked because you've kind of done a few things and now you don't know how long or how much longer you can actually spark that creative energy, we've put some thoughts and ideas together for you that could hopefully give you some food for thought. We love having our Friday afternoon giggle off at HR Gurus, where we all, bring to the screen a beverage of whatever thought we're feeling at the time, and really be able to reflect on the week that was, what we're going to do, and how we can actually still have a laugh with each other. Because usually our work family is such a massive part of the way that we engage, and it's really important to keep that alive.
I think that's so true, Dora, and so many teams are actually, it's easier to have a Friday afternoon virtual catch up than on a Friday afternoon after work catching up when you've got a lot of obligations, family obligations and anything else. It's much easier to log on for half an hour and have a bit of fun with your team. So, there's been a lot of benefits to this, to working remotely, and that people are feeling more connected now than they were before.
Absolutely. So what's it going to look like?
That's one of my favourite questions.
Me too.
Bit of an unknown, but I think that we definitely need to take some of the good that we've learnt from this. I think legally there's going to be some interesting revelations for some organisations who've always said, in terms of flexible work, no, you can't work from home. We can't manage that. It's going to be a really hard excuse now, because most organisations can manage the working from home. So it'll have implications in that respect. But there's been so many efficiencies learned that we can take away that connectedness. We can take away the great stuff we've learned with remote learning. I mean, I know a lot of sales consultants and trainers and people who have to travel a long way to have, a 1 hour meeting can now save so much time and expenses by having their meetings online and virtually, that hopefully, we can take some of that into the future and drive some efficiencies. I know of organisations that are now saying, well, we don't need as big an office anymore. We can reduce our rent because we can have our team working from home for 50% of the time. So, it's about taking away the best stuff out of this remote working experience and integrating it into our future. I think in the immediate term, organisations are going to have to think about the remote working restrictions are likely to ease as soon as next week, gradually. But, organisations also need to think about how they're going to manage the health and safety implications as well about bringing people back to work, and what's that going to look like in a post-restriction world, but it's not exactly a post-COVID world. So we're going to have a lot of safety measures, hand sanitizer on every desk. If you're hot desking, hygiene practices have to be a lot better. So there'll be implications in that respect as well. But I think the golden opportunity is around what have we done that's been great in this remote working environment that we can integrate into our future.
Because, Jessy, what I'm hearing here as well is that, yes, there's going to be people that do want to stay working from home or working remotely, but there's also going to be people that want to actually come back to the office. Yeah, they're going to want to get away from their home They're going to want to get away from what has been possibly might have been more of a challenge than something that's been really inspirational. So I think organisations moving forward are going to have a split option where people can have a space that they can come to and do their work. Maybe it might look completely different. As leaders, it's really important for us at this point to be able to think about and brainstorm and connect in with other organisations and collaborate with other organisations and see how they are doing things and what works and what doesn't work, so that we can offer our people a kaleidoscope of options to get the work done.
Yeah, well, we've definitely learnt about what is possible and how we can pivot. Excuse me. I
bless you.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dora. I think that there are a lot of possibilities. I think it's a really great time to get together with, your teams and work out what you want to keep, what worked well, what you want to keep, what you want to ditch, because next week and moving forward, it's going to change, but it doesn't mean that we need to leave everything that we've learnt from this experience in this time. We can integrate some of these great practices and new efficiencies and connectedness into the future.
You've actually tapped on something really good there, Jessy, just before we go into our available resources, is that, there's still, when we actually got thrown into this, we didn't have the opportunity to set up a change. So in change management, we see that usually it's planned and then we roll it out. So we've, the last couple of weeks, we've been thrust into a different way of living. But now as leaders and as consultants, we're starting to plan what the return's going to look like. And here at HR Gurus, we've been working really, really hard, haven't we? And thanks, Emily, for joining us, because I think that you can share a little bit of light on how we've been working like ducks, really fast under the surface and really calm on top, to support our clients and our people to be able to navigate that return to work in a more planned, structured, proactive way.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. This is unknown for everybody and unplanned. We've been thrust into this, but we've also had to pivot as HR practitioners and coaches and consultants, because we've had to relearn and learn a whole bunch of new stuff, which we've been doing a lot of. And as a result, we've developed some really cool resources to help our clients. And it's all based on the questions and problems that you guys are having. So the first one is a COVID-19 pack, which helps businesses navigate things like JobKeeper, stand downs, and all of the kind of gadunk, nuts and bolts of the HR issues that you might be having. So we're going to be sending through some more information about this to everybody who's signed up for this webinar via email. But the second thing that we're doing that I'm really excited about is facilitated workshops with leadership teams to help them get really clear about what worked really, really well over these past couple of months, what didn't work so well, and what you want to take forward, so that you've got a really clear action plan and strategy, rather than just doing this as an afterthought, being more proactive and on the ball, because that's what you're going to need to be. And we're also going to be sending through a summary of everything that we shared with you guys today. So we'll send through a PDF, and we're also here to support any businesses that are going through massive changes or shifts right now. And we're really excited about the future. This has definitely helped our team to be more productive and efficient. And I know that I've basically worked out that I can do my job in 2.5 days a week, which I've always wanted to do. We've been talking about this shit for years, right? This whole flexible work thing, the 3-day work week and all this other jazz that's been documented and written about. And now we're being forced to live it. So I think that this has been a great positive step for workplace reform, and it's going to be really interesting to see which companies thrive and survive this and which companies don't really keep up and make the required changes. So on that note, I would like to thank Dora and Jessy for their awesome insights. It's been great listening to you, and we're really excited about helping support businesses in the future. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Emily.
So how do people get in touch with us, Emily, if they want to hear more about what we've got on offer?
Sorry, I need to go to the next slide. So here is our contact details. Sorry, trying to multitask there. This is actually our first ever live webinar, so sorry for some of the little glitches, but we're learning. We're retraining ourselves, upskilling. So here are our details if you want to get in touch. We're going to record this and we're going to share it with our community as well. And we're also going to be sending people an email with all of those details that I just went through. So the PDF and some other stuff.
Fantastic. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody who tuned in, and we'll be doing more of these. So this is our first one, and to watch this space, we'll be letting everybody know what the next topic is going to be in the next week. Thanks for tuning in.